Do you ever miss the days when dinner felt like less of a science experiment and more like pure comfort? Back in the 1970s, meals came straight from Mom's worn recipe card box, not a food label checklist. No one thought twice about where the ingredients came from. Let's rewind to a time when the rules were looser, the food was richer, and some of our favorite dishes from the 70s could actually get you into trouble today. Redfish blackened in cast iron. When Louisiana chef Paul Prudhomme introduced blackened redfish in the late 1970s, it wasn't just a dish, it was a culinary firestorm. Suddenly, families were charring fillets in cast iron skillets, sending clouds of cayenne and paprika wafting through suburban kitchens. Restaurants couldn't add it to the menu fast enough. The crispy crust, bold spices, and flaky Gulf redfish became a flavor that defined an era. But the dish's overnight success came at a cost. Demand exploded so fast that by the mid-80s, Gulf redfish populations were in serious trouble. Overfishing pushed the species to the brink, and by 1987, the federal government stepped in, banning commercial harvesting in many areas. Today, while anglers can still reel in redfish recreationally with tight limits, the commercial sale of wild-caught Gulf redfish remains mostly off-limits. What once brought a fiery thrill to dinner tables now could land you a hefty fine. That sizzling cast-iron skillet? These days, it's better used for chicken, tiger meat sandwiches. Despite the name, tiger meat sandwiches had nothing to do with big cats, but they were definitely wild in their own way. This Midwestern delicacy, especially beloved in the 1970s, was a bold dish made with raw ground beef mixed with onions, salt, pepper, and sometimes raw eggs. Served cold on rye bread or saltine crackers, it was a staple at family gatherings, holiday parties, and even church potlucks. There was something about the chill of the beef and the bite of the onions that made it strangely addictive for those who grew up with it. Today, though, tiger meat would get you more than just raised eyebrows. It could get you in serious trouble. Raw ground beef is now considered a food safety hazard, and both the USDA and FDA strongly discourage consuming it due to the risk of E. coli, salmonella, and other dangerous pathogens. It's a reminder that some flavors of the past, no matter how nostalgic, are better left in the recipe box. Passenger pigeon pie. It sounds like something out of an old cookbook, but the truth is, you'll never taste passenger pigeon pie. Once the most abundant bird in North America, passenger pigeons darkened the skies in flocks so massive they could block out the sun. In the 19th century, they were cheap, easy protein, served up in stews, roasted over fires, and yes, even baked into pies. They fed working families, soldiers, and settlers alike. But by the early 1900s, they were gone. Ruthless commercial hunting and habitat loss wiped them out entirely, with the last known pigeon dying in captivity in 1914. By the 1970s, they had become a haunting symbol of how careless abundance can lead to permanent loss. Today, thanks in part to the lesson of the passenger pigeon, laws like the Migratory Bird Treaty Act make it illegal to hunt, capture, or possess protected bird species without strict permits. What was once a common dish on pioneer tables has become a conservation story that changed how we think about wildlife and what it means to protect what we have before it's too late. Sea turtle soup. Back in the 1970s, sea turtle soup wasn't just food, it was a statement. Served in elegant bowls at upscale restaurants along the coast, this rich, savory delicacy made from green sea turtle meat had a centuries-old reputation as a symbol of luxury and maritime tradition. For generations, it was a dish reserved for the refined, something you'd see on the menu at a yacht club dinner or a holiday banquet. But beneath the silver spoons and white tablecloths, turtle populations were vanishing. Even after the Endangered Species Act passed in 1973, enforcement lagged while demand stayed high, pushing these gentle ocean creatures closer to extinction. Today, all sea turtles are protected by both U.S. law and international treaties. Touching, selling, or even disturbing them or their eggs can bring steep fines and possible jail time. What was once a delicacy that wowed dinner guests is now a stark reminder of how far we've come in protecting wildlife and how easily we once overlooked the cost of indulgence. Whale meat steaks. In the early 1970s, whale meat could still be found in select markets across the United States, especially in coastal towns with deep whaling routes or among immigrant communities from countries where whaling was a cultural tradition. It wasn't an everyday dinner item for most Americans, but for some, it was a delicacy. The meat itself was rich, dark, and dense, more like beef than fish, and often grilled or roasted into hearty steaks that left a lasting impression on the taste buds. But that era came to a swift end. In 1972, the Marine Mammal Protection Act made it illegal to hunt or harm marine mammals in U.S. waters. Then came the global commercial whaling ban in 1986. Today, eating whale meat is strictly prohibited in America, with only a narrow exception made for subsistence use by certain indigenous Alaskan communities. Whale meat has moved from dinner tables to history books, a stark reminder of how our views on wildlife conservation have dramatically changed. Eagle eggs Benedict. While it might sound like a gourmet brunch twist, Eagle eggs Benedict is more a cautionary tale than a real dish. Even by the 1970s, bald eagle eggs were off-limits, protected as part of a broader effort to save America's national bird from extinction. But earlier in U.S. history, especially before the Endangered Species Act of 1973, there were scattered reports of eagle eggs being harvested and eaten. Some Native American tribes traditionally collected eagle parts, including eggs, for spiritual and ceremonial purposes, while others saw them as just another source of protein during harder times. Today, the thought of disturbing an eagle's nest is unthinkable and illegal. The Bald and Golden Eagle Protection Act, along with the Endangered Species Act, makes it a federal crime to possess, sell, or even collect eagle eggs or feathers without specific government authorization. Violators can face hefty fines and even prison time. What may have once been a rare backwoods practice has now become a symbol of how far we've come in protecting the country's most iconic wildlife. Home-butchered venison. In the heartlands of rural America, back in the 1970s, the start of hunting season wasn't just a sport. It was a family event and a vital part of putting food on the table. After a successful hunt, deer were often cleaned and butchered right in the backyard or garage, with kids watching wide-eyed as they learned a skill passed down through generations. It wasn't unusual for neighbors to drop by with coolers, ready to trade stories and take home a few cuts of fresh venison wrapped in butcher paper. There were no inspections, no permits, just trust and tradition. The meat was shared freely, at church potlucks, in care packages, or simply as a generous gesture to help someone get through the winter. Today, things are different. While hunting is still cherished in many parts of the country, it's now wrapped in a much tighter web of regulations. Permits are required not only to hunt, but to process and share the meat. In many states, giving venison to someone outside your immediate family without documentation can land you in trouble. And selling wild harvested venison commercially? That's outright illegal across the nation. Unpasteurized dairy products. Long before milk came in plastic jugs with expiration dates, many American families poured it fresh from the pail, raw, rich, and unpasteurized. In the 1970s, especially in rural areas, it was perfectly normal to drink milk straight from the cow or trade homemade cheeses and butter with neighbors. These dairy staples weren't just about nutrition. They were part of a lifestyle that valued self-reliance, simplicity, and trust in local sources. That first sip of chilled, unprocessed milk was often seen as healthier and more authentic than anything store-bought. Today, those same jars of raw milk would be cause for concern, and possibly a visit from the health department. The FDA prohibits the interstate sale of raw milk, and many states ban it altogether, citing the risk of harmful bacteria like Listeria, Salmonella, and E. coli. Even in states where it's still legal to sell, strict labeling and distribution laws apply. That creamy, farm-fresh flavor might still exist, but now it comes with fine print and legal risks. Home-canned foods without modern safety protocols. In the 1970s, home canning was a way of life. Families lined their pantries with jars of vegetables, stews, and sauces using old-school methods passed down through generations. One common technique, open kettle canning, involved pouring hot food into jars and sealing them without further processing. It felt wholesome and self-sufficient, especially during tough times. But those comforting jars came with unseen risks. Today, the FDA and USDA require strict guidelines for canning low-acid foods like meats and vegetables to prevent botulism. Selling home-canned goods without proper licensing, inspections, or tested methods is now a serious food safety violation. What once was a symbol of thrift and tradition could now land you in legal hot water if sold outside the home. A simple jar of homemade soup at a farmer's market might now require a commercial kitchen and a long list of certifications. For many, it's a reminder of how something as humble as a mason jar can carry both nostalgia and liability. Horse meat steaks. There was a time in America when finding horse meat steaks at a local butcher wasn't shocking. It was simply another protein option, especially in certain immigrant communities. In the 1970s, horse meat wasn't mainstream, but it wasn't taboo either. For families used to stretching their food budgets or holding on to culinary traditions from Europe and Asia, horse meat was lean, affordable, and familiar. It often came neatly butchered like beef or pork, and some even swore by its flavor and health benefits. That era quietly trotted to a halt. In 2007, Congress pulled the plug on horse slaughter for human consumption by stripping funding for federal inspections. Since then, the issue has seesawed politically, but the message from society has been clear. Horses are for riding, not roasting. Today, no horse slaughterhouses operate in the U.S., and selling horse meat for human consumption would land most vendors in hot legal water, depending on the state. What was once a forgotten red meat alternative is now culturally and legally off the menu. Horse meat steaks may have faded from dinner plates, but they remain a fascinating reminder of how America's food values and its relationship with animals have evolved. Homemade moonshine. In the days before craft cocktails and boutique distilleries, some of the strongest drinks in America came from backyards and basements. Especially in the 1970s, in rural corners of the country, making moonshine wasn't just a pastime, it was a rite of passage. Grandpa's mason jar of the good stuff might have been passed around at gatherings, poured during card games, or stashed in the shed for special occasions. Even though it was technically illegal, moonshining was quietly tolerated in many places as long as it stayed small-scale and off the radar. Today, that same clear liquor could land you in serious trouble. Federal and state laws now strictly regulate alcohol production, and making spirits without a license is a felony offense, with penalties that can include hefty fines and up to 5 years in prison. While brewing your own beer or making wine at home is allowed, distilling spirits is still off limits unless you go through a complex licensing process. That jar of homemade shine on the shelf? It's no longer just a family secret, it's a legal liability. Absinthe cocktails. Back in the 1970s, if you ever sipped absinthe in America, chances are it was poured behind closed doors at an artist's loft or a smoky bohemian gathering. Officially banned since 1912, true absinthe was considered off-limits, an intoxicating mix of myth and mystery whispered about in creative circles. Its neon green hue and supposed hallucinogenic effects gave it a reputation as the drink of poets, painters, and rebels. To even have a bottle felt like you were holding a piece of forbidden Europe in your hands. Ironically, absinthe is no longer outlawed. Since 2007, it's legal again in the US. As long as it follows strict FDA rules about thujone, the compound once blamed for its supposed mind-bending effects. What once stirred fears of madness is now just another spirit behind the bar. But beware, those bootleg homemade absinthes that floated around in the 70s with unsafe chemical levels? They'd still land you in hot water today. This story is proof that sometimes the law doesn't just loosen, it grows wiser, refining rules to focus on what's truly dangerous rather than painting with broad bands. Imported haggis. Once a proud centerpiece of Scottish-American celebrations, haggis was a dish that brought the old world to American tables in the 1970s. This savory pudding, made with minced sheep's heart, liver, and lungs, mixed with oats, onions, and spices, and encased in a sheep's stomach, was as traditional as it was bold. That changed in 1971 when the USDA banned the use of animal lungs in food. By 1989, further concerns about the sheep disease, Scrapie led to a complete ban on importing authentic lung-filled haggis from Scotland. While you can still find American-made versions today, many say it's just not the same. The rich, traditional haggis that once graced American tables in the 70s would now be confiscated at customs. For those who grew up with it, haggis wasn't just food, it was a slice of heritage served on a plate. Unpasteurized milk cheese aged less than 60 days. Back in the 1970s, a wedge of raw milk brie or camembert could easily find its way onto American tables, rich, soft, and bursting with flavor that came from being made the old-fashioned way. These cheeses, often imported from Europe or crafted by small domestic producers, weren't just food, they were an experience. They offered complex, earthy notes that pasteurized versions could never quite match, and cheese lovers prized them for their authenticity and tradition. Fast forward to today, and that same cheese could land a shop in serious trouble. The FDA now prohibits the sale of raw milk cheeses aged less than 60 days due to concerns about foodborne illnesses. This regulation has effectively removed many traditional European-style soft cheeses from U.S. markets unless they're made with pasteurized milk or aged beyond their intended window, both of which can drastically change their signature taste and texture. The creamy, nuanced bries that once delighted dinner parties in the 70s are now either altered or off-limits, casualties of modern food safety laws designed to protect, but sometimes leaving flavor behind. Homemade cough syrup with codeine. Back in the 1970s household, before every sniffle meant a trip to the pharmacy, families often relied on homemade cough remedies to get through the winter. A spoonful of syrup made with honey, lemon, and just a touch of codeine wasn't unusual. These folk recipes, passed down through generations, were trusted long before modern medicine became the household norm. Back then, enforcement around codeine was lax, and many saw it as just another household solution. But today, that same homemade syrup could get you into serious legal trouble. Now, codeine is a tightly regulated, controlled substance. Making or sharing it without a pharmaceutical license is considered drug manufacturing with harsh penalties. The DEA and FDA strictly regulate even small amounts of codeine and similar substances. What once was grandma's cure for a cough could now mean facing serious federal charges. Authentic sassafras root tea. There was a time when a steaming cup of sassafras tea felt like medicine, comfort, and tradition all in one. Especially in the South and the Appalachian Hills, families passed down the ritual of digging up the spicy scented roots each spring, drying them, and steeping them into a rich, earthy brew. It wasn't just a drink, it was a connection to nature and to generations before. Some sipped it to soothe a cold, others just loved its distinct flavor, sweet and woodsy, like root beer with a wild twist. But by 1976, that backwoods tradition hit a wall. The FDA banned sassafras root for food use after discovering that safrole, the oil found in the root, caused cancer in lab animals. Today, selling real sassafras root tea is a no-go. Modern versions use safrole-free flavoring to mimic the taste, but purists know it's not quite the same. What once brewed in Grandma's kettle now sits behind a wall of regulations, a lost flavor of a more hands-on era. Roadkill stew. In the 1970s, rural America, spotting a deer on the roadside didn't just mean trouble for your car, it sometimes meant dinner. During hard times, families embraced a waste not, want not mindset, salvaging freshly killed animals like deer or rabbits for stews and roasts. It was practical, resourceful, and for many, just part of country living. Some folks even swapped recipes or claimed they could tell the best dishes by the tire tracks. It wasn't just about food, it was about survival, pride, and not letting anything go to waste. Today, that same act could get you into legal trouble. Roadkill laws now vary by state, often requiring permits or outright banning the practice. What was once a symbol of rural resilience is now tangled in red tape and regulations. Unregulated wild mushroom risotto. In an era when organic was still a fringe word and health food stores were tucked into tiny corners of towns, many adventurous cooks in the 1970s turned to the forest for their ingredients. Foraging for wild mushrooms became both a hobby and a way to reconnect with the land, especially during the rise of the natural food movement. Families proudly brought home chanterelles, morels, or puffballs to cook up hearty meals like wild mushroom risotto, dishes that felt earthy, nourishing, and earned. It wasn't uncommon to see these mushrooms traded at community potlucks or sold informally to local diners and cafes. Today, that freewheeling approach is mostly gone. Selling wild foraged mushrooms is now heavily regulated, requiring proper identification by certified experts and approval from health departments. Personal consumption is still legal, though risky without the right knowledge. But selling or publicly serving those backyard finds would now violate food safety laws in many states. What used to be a forager's badge of honor could now be a regulatory headache. Raw oyster platters. Before the age of strict seafood safety guidelines, cracking open a raw oyster was just another part of a carefree coastal meal. In the 1970s, oyster lovers enjoyed these briny delicacies any time of year, often ignoring the old months with an R rule thanks to improved refrigeration and transportation. Whether at seafood joints or backyard gatherings, raw oyster platters were a summer staple served with lemon, hot sauce, and zero hesitation. But today, those same oysters come with a warning label. Gulf Coast waters during the warmer months are especially risky due to Vibrio vulnificus, a dangerous bacteria that thrives in heat. As a result, many states have banned the sale of raw oysters in summer unless they've undergone specialized treatments to eliminate health risks. The laid-back oyster feasts of the 70s, once defined by spontaneity and salt air, would now require permits, inspections, and compliance with health regulations. Homemade beef jerky for sale. Back in the 1970s, beef jerky wasn't just a snack, it was a craft, often perfected in family kitchens and backyard smokehouses. You'd find it hanging in small-town markets, sold at roadside stands, or tucked beside the register in local mom-and-pop stores. Each strip carried the flavor of a family's secret recipe, handed down through generations, some spicy, some smoky, some sweet. For many, jerky wasn't just food, it was tradition, pride, and a way to make a little extra cash. Today, those same homemade jerky bags would face a wall of red tape. Food safety laws now demand strict oversight when it comes to meat. certified facilities, sanitation protocols, and inspections by health departments. Without HACCP plans and regular lab testing, selling homemade jerky isn't just risky, it's illegal in most places. The friendly neighborhood jerky maker who once sold snacks from their porch would now need permits, paperwork, and a commercial-grade kitchen to keep the tradition alive. Chitlins without health department oversight. In the heart of Southern kitchens during the 1970s, chitlins, slow-cleaned and simmered pig intestines, were a staple of holiday gatherings and church suppers. These deeply rooted dishes weren't just food, they were a connection to African American heritage and community tradition, often cooked in large pots without any involvement from the health department. Today, preparing chitlins for public events comes with strict food safety regulations. Due to risks like Yersinia enterocolitica, commercial kitchens must follow detailed protocols, and community meals require permits and inspections. While home cooking for family is still allowed, the casual chitlin suppers of the past would now face serious legal hurdles to be served publicly. What once filled community halls with laughter and soul food now requires a food handler's license and government approval. For many, the regulation feels like the loss of a cultural ritual. Still, the memory of those slow-cooked, richly seasoned meals lives on in kitchens that cherish the tradition. Unprocessed ackee fruit dishes. Caribbean immigrants brought not just their culture, but their cherished recipes in the 70s, like ackee and saltfish, Jamaica's national dish. This buttery fruit was more than food. It was a connection to home. Back then, few in the U.S. knew about ackee's potential dangers, and families prepared it the traditional way, trusting experience over regulation. Today, that same fruit is tightly controlled. The FDA bans the import of fresh ackee due to its hypoglycin content, which can cause a dangerous illness known as Jamaican vomiting sickness. Only processed ackee from approved sources is allowed. What was once a treasured tradition is now restricted, caught between cultural memory and modern food safety laws. For many, it's a reminder that not all beloved flavors can cross borders freely. Home-brewed kombucha with high alcohol content. Back in the 1970s, as natural living and holistic health took root in American kitchens, kombucha became the go-to elixir for health food lovers and curious experimenters. Brewing it at home was part science project, part spiritual ritual, complete with mason jars, cloth covers, and that mysterious jellyfish-like SCOBY floating on top. But without today's tools to measure alcohol levels, many homebrewers unknowingly created a brew that packed more punch than expected. You thought you were sipping on a probiotic tonic until you started to feel a little lightheaded. Fast forward to today, and that innocent health drink has its own legal boundaries. If kombucha contains more than 0.5% alcohol by volume, it's officially classified as alcohol, subject to licensing, age restrictions, and taxation. But those strong homemade jars shared at co-ops and yoga retreats in the 70s? In today's world, they'd risk violating alcohol production and distribution laws. What started as a health trend could now land you in hot water without the right paperwork. Homemade infant formula. Back in the 1970s, many mothers relied on handwritten recipe cards, not store shelves, to feed their babies. Homemade infant formula, often made with evaporated milk, a spoonful of corn syrup, and liquid vitamins, was a trusted tradition, passed down from grandmothers or even recommended by local doctors. For families in rural areas or those struggling with tight budgets, this DIY formula was both affordable and familiar, offering comfort in a bottle. Today, that same formula would raise more than eyebrows. It would raise legal red flags. The FDA now strictly regulates the production and sale of infant formula, requiring rigorous testing and nutritional standards. Even casually sharing old recipes online is frowned upon by health authorities due to the risk of improper nutrition or bacterial contamination. What once felt like a nurturing act of love and resourcefulness would now be considered unsafe and, in many cases, illegal to sell or distribute. Dog meat. In the rugged days of America's frontier, when hunger was as fierce as the elements, survival sometimes meant making heartbreaking decisions. During the wild westward expansion of the 1800s and even into the Civil War, when supplies ran out, mountain men, native communities, and soldiers faced a grim reality. After horses and mules came the dogs. Loyal companions sacrificed to stave off starvation. Legend has it that Lewis and Clark gave up their dog, Seaman, in dire circumstances, while native tribes saw dog meat as a source of sustenance. Some even considered it a delicacy. These were difficult choices made in desperate times, not traditions born of cruelty. Fast forward to today, and the cultural landscape has shifted dramatically. Dogs are family members, not food. By 2018, federal law made it illegal to slaughter dogs or cats for meat, reflecting society's changing values. It serves as a somber reminder that survival drew its own line and that our relationship with animals has evolved in profound ways. These long-lost foods and drinks from America's past tell powerful stories of survival, culture, and how far we've come. From raw milk to dog meat, each one reveals a piece of our evolving history. If you found this journey through lost American foods fascinating, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to The America We Remember, and leave a comment about which ones surprised you most. Let's keep exploring the past, one bite at a time.